Okay, now, Cornel, as you know what it's our famous time is. You know, it's office hours time,
Office
right? It's office
hours,
hours time.
office hours.
Yes, indeed. Before we start office hours, Cornel, tell me, do you have a story, a memorable story of an office hours experience that is safe to share? You know, what would be because you know you've had some epic office hours. I mean, I've
Oh,
seen the hallways filled with children lined up. I mean, they look hungry and tired, like someone should bring them some coffee if they've been there so long, because everybody wants to hear you. So, but could you have a quick, any memory comes to mind? If it
well,
doesn't, that's all right.
no, but just very quick. I recall I had an office hour in Princeton in about 1991. A sister named Deb Chasman, who was I was to find out, legendary editor at Beacon
Right.
Press. She came to my office. She said, it'd be wonderful to have a book. I said, well, I don't really have a book. And she looked around on the floor and saw all these different essays. She said, oh my God, this looks good. This looks good. This looks good. This looks good. And that became the basis of Race Matters right there.
Wow. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
She just picked up pieces of paper off the floor of your office.
Right on the floor. She's now managing editor of Boston Review, one of the crucial institutions of left and progressive thinking. But no, Sister Deb just showed up at the office.
Wow.
I said, oh, you think that? Oh, you think that's all right? You think that's going to be I said, oh, yeah, this is in Dissent, man. This American Prospect. This is in Praxis. That was edited at that time by our dear brother Lucius Outlaw, the first really towering black philosophical figure to be associated with the critical school. Or School of Critical Theory at the Frankfurt School, I should say, the Frankfurt School.
Right.
But so I had an essay in that journal, and so it just turned out office hours was over. I found out I had a book.
Well, now that's a good office hours. I'm gonna tell you right now. Any office hours that ends in a manuscript, you know, is the kind of office hours I'm looking for. And of course, you know, Race Matters is is an amazing set of essays. Really, I mean, just so generative. I mean, just so powerful. And the fact that, you know, they were not intended to be together, that they were already sort of together in your mind, but they weren't brought together intentionally, is remarkable. And thank goodness she came and waited in that line.
Sister Deb had read the introduction, and then I think I wrote one piece on black sexuality, the taboo subject.
Yeah, no, that was good. You said we're in the same boat, but black men and women are in the same boat, but sometimes at each other's throats.
Oh, that's real.
I remember that line, and you know that's. I know you remember lines. I don't, so this is really impressive of me. I just want you to know. I have to open the book up with a Post-it. So, but that one, I was like, oh Lord, have mercy. This one, he's right about this one. In the same boat, but sometimes at each other's throats.
Lord.
So, all right. Well, now we're going to have our own office hours. We don't. Maybe a manuscript will come out of this. I don't know, but so for new listeners or new viewers, office hours is a segment where we do a deep dive into some of the most intractable issues that our audience is curious about. Sometimes they send us questions directly. Other times we just get wind of it through the various social media channels. This week, one of our listeners sent us an email asking us about whether or not the removal of historical but racially implicated American monuments is distracting to the real work of racially dismantling, of dismantling systemic racism, as opposed to, say, disfunding the police. So, you know, what role should we assign to this monument project, right? Is this really the heart of what we need to be doing? Is it a distraction? Is it a piece of the puzzle? You know, how should we understand it? Is it something that will really overshadow the much harder work? So, I mean, this is a good question. I appreciate it, and it's a legitimate thing, because it seems every day there's a monument, a flag, an institution being renamed, and it raises the question: if the name is different but the institution's the same, who really cares what we call it, right? I mean, or does it really matter? So, Cornel, why don't you start us off with this?
You know, T.S. Eliot used to say, we moderns are distracted from distractions by distractions. And there's some insight in that. He's a right-wing brother, but he was a poet of genius, that the symbolic does matter. And so the symbolic replacement of white supremacist figures with figures who tried to stay in contact with the humanity of black and indigenous peoples and all of us really makes a difference. But the symbolic is not the substantive. And the substantive always has to do with connecting the relation between police power, Wall Street power, Pentagon power. Police crimes, Wall Street crimes, Pentagon crimes. And then the response to that power and those crimes in terms of democratic accountability of elites, too often driven by greed and indifference. Those issues then of poverty, of jobs, of schools, of quality, housing, of decency, and then self-respect and self-regard. That's at the center of any freedom movement. So if we get too preoccupied with these symbolic gestures, they do become distractions. And the status quo says, you know what? You all change all your monuments we want, but the class hierarchy, the gender-based hierarchy, the imperial policies, it's going to stay right in place.
Yep, because, you know, that is not impossible, because early on in your comments, Cornel, you said, you know, to take down these symbols of white supremacy and replace them with symbols of, you know, racial, you know, justice or whatever else they may be, right? That second move is not a guarantee. That's number one.
Exactly
right. Who knows who's going to replace Robert E. Lee and who, you know, God knows who else, right? So there's that. And then there's really the question of whether or not one could put Harriet Tubman and let the dirty work behind that institutional name be the same work in the first place, and thereby transform the actual meaning of Harriet Tubman.
That's exactly right. So she then could easily get used and abused in that way. And of course, there's a deeper philosophical and theological issue, which is, in the end, you know, it's hard to think of any human being who really deserves a monument.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, I make one for my mama, you know, but even mom got her faults, you know. See what I mean?
And there'd be your own private monument, you know. You wouldn't just make it a national.
So, you know, you can put Martin up there, and we know what Martin means. He died for us, but he still had homophobic sensibilities. He still had a patriarchal orientations and so forth, so that he's not going to be pure, but he's so much better. And we understand we had to make some choices. We do need monuments, and therefore certain ones got to go. But we got to recognize that in the end, these really are still human beings.
Right. But the monuments become monuments to ideas, and monuments to power relationships, to celebration of domination. And so, so that's what I think people are feeling so worried and upset about. But, you know, maybe, you know, given the flaws that we all have, we should take a page out of the comments from our guest, George Lipsitz, who said, you know, what his students in the prisons around Houston said, which is, you know, he didn't get it all right, but he got the most important basics right. So we're going to decide pick our new monuments will be people who basically got the core problem right. They don't have to be perfect, right?
No, that's real. That's
but
real.
I do worry about how, you know, not just because the monuments are symbolic versus structural, but, you know, I think we're going to see a substantial backlash around preservationist of white heritage. And that's going to be racialized as a response to the racialized movements that non-whites are establishing for social justice purposes. And the more we attack the symbolic, the more will fuel, I believe, that kind of sort of white heritage ideology. And I think the harder work, which you identified, which, you know, I think I talk about is systemic racism, right? The way, you know, the accumulation of housing discrimination and the wealth disadvantages and the criminal justice processes that ghettoization fuels, and so on. This is work that is much, much harder to do.
Absolutely.
And you know, I really don't want to use too much of, you know, even if it's blind goodwill, I don't want to use none of it up because I don't know how much there's going to be.
We're going to need all that goodwill we can get.
Exactly.
No,
you got to prioritize. You got to prioritize, you know.
No, that's very real. It's very real.
So,
but there's a sense in which the move toward the symbolic is always a certain kind of symptom of people feeling relatively powerless to really hit the structural issues.
Right.
To hit the substantive issues. So they
Right.
opt for something symbolic and think that lo and behold, we've got a major victory rather
Right.
than a first step in a long, long revolutionary struggle.
Exactly. But, again, there is a concern that this is the kind of repetition of the psychology of symbolism that results from a certain kind of powerlessness, right?
That's
Right.
absolutely.
And so,
That's right.
but, that's disturbing, because really one could say this is the most potential power we've had in terms of, large numbers of people in some fundamental general agreement, right? That this is wrong, right? Even if we don't define what
That's
it is
true.
perfectly. And so I worry, as I said, that we might be squandering that. So I guess to answer our listener / viewer, I think, I don't think that police reform is the only answer, or defunding the police is the only answer. But I think, I don't think changing the names of institutions, I think that's going to let people off a little too easily.
A little too
So
easy.
yeah, I think
But
that's
they're
where
all
I would come
steps.
down.
They're all steps. They're all
Yeah.
steps. I mean, we can talk about police accountability, talk about that, make a shift, ensuring a shift in funds that are concerned with militaristic functions as opposed to
Moving them into social
supportive
services and
functions.
support.
Absolutely, those are all steps. So, but we have to move toward kind of revolutionary reforms rather than the reforms that would pacify the movement and make us satisfied with the symbolic and the superficial rather than
Right.
something that's real and concrete.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. I mean, I appreciate it, because we don't want to dismiss or belittle
Right.
the emotional value.
Absolutely.
Right. That's
Right.
what I'm
That's
hearing.
right.
Yeah.
That's you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
You said it
No.
so much more eloquently than
No. I was just
could.
the
I
person
love
who
it.
repeats the person
I
who
love
spoke
it.
has an
I
advantage.
love it. No, you got a clarity. You got a clarity, though, my dear sister.
Oh yeah. So all right. Well, we'll have to keep up on these monuments and see what's going on with that, and hope for the best, that we can turn that into some, to be a partner in the process of transforming, what we value, right? And
Right. That's
maybe
right. That's right.
we'll have some impact. All right, everybody. Well, it's getting to be about that time. We're going to have to say so long for now. I want to just thank my dear co-host and dear friend, Cornel West, for being a fantastic interlocutor, and our wonderful guest, George Lipsitz, dear friend and brilliant colleague. Everyone out there, please join us again. We're really thrilled that you're with us today. And don't forget to share our links on social media, subscribe, and please join us the next time on The Tightrope. Take good care. Dear Tightrope family, we are joining Patreon. We're partnering with Patreon because they are empowering creators to maintain independence, thereby allowing us to offer you access to weekly exclusive content. By joining, you will gain access to special opportunities to engage with us as we share what we're reading, offer behind-the-scenes clips from our episodes, and ask you for your input around what we should focus on next. We want to express our sincere gratitude for consideration in joining us on The Tightrope and becoming part of our Patreon community. Thank you for helping us to maintain our creative freedom on this righteous journey as we produce and distribute content of high integrity. Together, we can amplify truth, cultivate hope, and work to create a just world. Thank you, and stay strong.
My blessed Tightrope family, we are delighted to work with our brothers and sisters at Patreon in order to preserve our independence of mind, to preserve our free spirits, and most importantly, to preserve our quest for truth and for beauty and for goodness. Please be with us on this journey.